Good evening, everybody. It is Wednesday. It is the day of the week, and I'm Duane Whitmer. So here we are for this week's weekly Whitmer Wisdom Wednesdays. This week is going to be a good topic that I can talk about for quite a bit, so I got to be careful. I got to make sure I keep it to 15 minutes, keep it short, keep it simple, keep it sweet. This week, we're going to talk about two things. We are going to talk about direct citizen action, what it is, why you should do it, and we're going to talk about the State of Defiance, which is a strategic plan that some people have come up with essentially to counter the progressive central bureaucracy. So first things first, you'll notice this week I got my new banner in, which is beautiful. It's got Whitmer for Liberty, so everyone knows what we're about. It's even got my little logo on it. I'll switch over. Statue of Liberty, Whitmer for Liberty, with a gun, with a standard capacity 30. It's an AR pattern rifle with a standard 30-round capacity magazine, which is what I believe anyone who passes a mental background check, or pardon me, passes a mental illness check and a criminal background check deserves to own for their own defense. She's even got a little book in her hand that says 2A, mainly because the Second Amendment is the most important amendment. Without the 2A, you have no demands. It's basically that. So new banner up, super pumped about it, really excited. I'll actually post in the comments. I started, no, we're not even going to do it. Got a little store on Teespring, but there's really nothing in there yet. I got to build that up so then you guys can buy my merchandise, which allows me to buy nicer things. So this week we're talking about direct action, direct citizen action. What is it? In the State of Defiance and the State of Defiance agenda. So first things first, the direct citizen action is a term coined by James Ostrowski, who's a mentor of mine. He's a friend of mine. He actually couldn't be here today in the comments telling me how great I am. He's doing a podcast for someone else. He's on a libertarian podcast network type thing. And so I asked him to define direct citizen action in one or two sentences. And he said that direct citizen action is what you can do today to advance liberty without anyone else's permission. Direct citizen action. It is essentially you doing you and helping others at the same time. Why this is important is as we're seeing a failed central bureaucracy, we're seeing centralized government not be able to do what it's supposed to do. It becomes our responsibility as citizens to step up. Maura shared the merch store, so boom, merch store. Thank you, Maura. It becomes our job as citizens and neighbors and people in the community to step up and help others. And a lot of people do. Charitable nations are great. People volunteer their time and effort to homeless shelters and volunteer time and effort to help others. So there is a lot of direct action helping in that sense. But there's a lot more you can do with direct action. And Steve Filano from 2NYS came up with an agenda. It was non-compliance, non-enforcement, and repeal. Jury nullification is another one. There's a lot of stuff you can do, but direct action is essentially removing the politicians, removing the central government, removing the reliance on other people, government, or removing the reliance on government force. So right now, what we have in our country is, I'm a person that wants to help the poor, and I have the option. I can take money to my pocket and go help the poor. I can volunteer my time. But what those people are really doing more often than not is voting for politicians who are going to raise someone else's tax dollars through government force and threats of government force to trickle down taxation. Money trickles down from the central government to the jobs program, to the bureaucracy, through the red tape, and eventually, like pennies on the dollar, goes to helping the poor. And really what you have is an overblown budget that really doesn't solve any problem. If central government worked, poverty, homelessness, I know that would be solved by now, but they don't have any incentive to do that because then they don't need to exist. So acknowledging that central planning has failed, central bureaucracy is an abject failure. Acknowledging that voting is more or less useless. It's mostly now the majority. Right now you have two warlords, red warlord, blue warlord, fighting for control of the government force. People are voting to punish the other side. People are voting to use government force to harm the other side. People are voting for their warlord to punish the other supporters of the other warlord. That's it. Really not really going to help the citizens. It's not going to help us. It's not going to work for us. We're doomed. So why keep relying on a broken system? Why not do it yourself? Someone else reached out to me, and this is something that maybe I'll go in detail on this one day and have a weekly Whitmer Wisdom Wednesday about it. But they want to talk about rigged elections, fraudulent elections, stolen elections. Recently, I actually spoke to someone who believes elections were rigged, and I said, well, yeah, every election's rigged. If you don't believe that, let's talk about in 2020 when there were actually 3 candidates on every single presidential ballot in the country, Trump Republican, Biden Democrat, and Jorgensen Libertarian, yet the Libertarian candidate wasn't allowed in debates. Isn't that a form of rigging the election, not allowing you to hear proper policy and platform of all choices? They didn't want to hear that. They were just mad Trump lost. And so, you can yell that elections are rigged and stolen and fraudulent. The answer is yes. Locally, where I am in Western New York, both parties rig elections by essentially using what they can to force outsider candidates out of the primary. Whether it's election finance issues, whether it's petitioning issues. In New York State, it's one of the hardest places to third-party petition for governor in the country. That's rigging an election. That's saying that small groups of people's votes don't matter, their opinions don't matter, and no one really cares because it's a small group of people. So if you're going to bitch that elections are rigged, the answer is they are, but what are you going to do about it? Why continue to participate in a rigged system? Why continue to put your reliance on that? Why continue voting for a stronger, larger central bureaucracy when you don't feel that the elections are valid? It's a failed strategy. It's running into the same wall over and over again with expecting different results, and it's a mental deficient idea. So it's time to change our strategy. Look, you know it, I know it, your neighbors know it, 80% of the country knows politicians are useless, whether they're Republican or Democrats, especially the higher you get. Local politicians, they're in the neighborhood, their kids go to school in the neighborhood, they care about local issues. You get to the county level, they kind of care a little bit more. You get to state or higher, and these people don't give a shit about you. They really don't. There's nothing you can do. You're one person. They do not care about you. So acknowledging that is a useless idea, direct action is the future. And what it is, using your time and energy and effort to help others, whether it's charitable giving, whether it's taking your own time and getting a group of friends to go do a highway cleanup, whether it's taking some group of friends and cooking some food and feeding the homeless. It's doing something to help others. It's simple. It takes the middleman out. It takes the bureaucracy out. It takes the red tape out. And now you're going to say, well, Duane, wait a minute. You mentioned feeding the homeless. You know that people have been arrested all over the country for feeding the homeless. And the answer is yeah, because the central bureaucracy doesn't want people to realize that it's a failed product. Not the point. Actually, it's a fun fact that the 11th Circuit ruled that feeding the homeless is actually First Amendment protected. Let me pull this article up. In feeding the homeless is actually now protected by the First Amendment. A lot of people don't know this. The 11th U.S. Circuit of Appeals officially ruled that feeding the homeless is a protected right in America. An organization called Food Not Bombs, which is a great organization, by the way, argued a city ordinance in Florida that did not allow individuals to share food with homeless people in public parks, and they actually got that law shot down. I know someone who was arrested in New York City for feeding the homeless. There's a video of police in, I believe, Louisville, Kentucky, pouring bleach on food that a church was giving to the homeless. You're going to have a problem. And that's where the defiance agenda comes in. So we're right to our next point. What is the state of defiance? What's the defiance agenda? For those of you that don't know who I am or follow from across the country, I actually live in Western New York State. New York State is, in my opinion, competing to be the best example of a failed central bureaucracy ever. They're competing with California, and I think New York State's pulling ahead. We have probably some of the dumbest politicians with the worst ideas, but they're great at taking your tax dollars and losing the money. So, we got New York State competing to be the perfect example of a failed central bureaucracy, right? And so I live in Western New York. Western New York has a very not caring, non-compliance attitude. I love it here. And what the state of defiance is picking things that you're going to do whether the state tells you can or can't, right? And I know people that do this through feeding the homeless. They still do it. I know a group of people that goes to Buffalo every week, feeds homeless people. I know a group of people who grow crops in their backyard against zoning laws. I know people that have chickens in their backyard, even though the town tells them they can't. I know someone who lives in a town where you're only allowed to have 2 dogs. And if you have more than 2 dogs, the dog enforcement officer gets mad. They have 3 dogs. And it sounds like stupidity. It's like, well, that's dumb, Duane. That's not much. It is, because it's little steps like that that prove that the enforcement arm of the state and the state laws are essentially useless. One of the best examples of this, of the state of defiance, was people not in compliance with the SAFE Act. Andrew Cuomo, in between sexually harassing women and before killing 15,000 old people in nursing homes during COVID, he took a break from grabbing women. Passed something called the SAFE Act, which is at the time one of the most aggressive gun control bills in this country. And rumored over 1 million people just didn't comply. You were supposed to register your AR pattern rifles, and people just said no. And that's defiance. And what it did was it proved that they don't have the enforcement arm. They don't have the competency, the ability. They didn't have the ability to enforce it. And so you're seeing essentially people show that the emperor has no clothes. I'm not saying you need to go all out and buy a tank or like a airplane, but I mean, everyone should be able to pick their defiance, whether it's, like I said earlier, building a deck without pulling a permit. That's defiance. Having chickens, that's defiance. Growing your own garden, that's a form of defiance. And some of those are legal, some are not. Like I said, buying a tank and having it in your garage, you might have to face the repercussions of that someday. But growing your own garden, not relying on central government and central planning to solve all your problems. This is a great way to live by, because it shows that if you say no, the state has around Andrew Colstein and I tried to figure this out. And it was actually harder to do. The state has around 35,000 police officers in New York City and another maybe 20,000 in the state. If people just say no and stop complying, the state doesn't have the ability to enforce these laws. You saw it during the lockdown with COVID. Some people were arrested, some people were charged, but a majority of people, they weren't. The state relies on you to be essentially drones and not ask questions and fall in line. And as evidenced by what's happening, they really can't do much of anything. It's a failed idea. Another great example of the state of defiance was during the snowstorm that hit Western New York. One of my friends who lived somewhere, I'm not going to say where, I'm not going to say who, but a friend of mine actually had his father's friend plow his road. He had a front end loader. My friend had money. My friend's road got plowed. That's a form of defiance. Technically, it's illegal to plow a road because the town or county has to do it. But when my friend had 4.5 feet of snow in his yard or in his road, and no plows were coming through, and the town he lived in was very, very delayed in response, my friend decided to phone a friend and get the job done. Technically, that's a form of defiance. But I'll tell you what, my friend could get out of his driveway. So, you pick the good, you pick the bad. But that's really what today is about. It's about starting a movement of people who aren't relying on politicians, not relying on legislators, not relying on courts, not relying on judges, and relying on ourselves and working with each other. I'd much rather work with any of my neighbors, even the one next door that doesn't really care for me much, over any politician, over any legislator. My neighbors, we're in the neighborhood together. We know each other. We see each other. We care about each other. If we had kids, if I had kids, my kids would be homeschooled. So our kids would not go to the same school. But, our kids play together. Our kids see each other. Those are better relationships. So that's kind of what today's about, is what is direct citizen action? What is the state of defiance? I might go into more detail. One of these days, I might sit down with Ostrowski and get a list. He's actually has 12 direct action 12 direct action bullet points on his website, which I believe is libertymovement.org. Maybe I'll sit down with him and go over a list of things that he recommends, what direct action is, and what you can do to get more involved with that and stop relying on politicians who really don't care about you. They view you as a paycheck. So the sooner we realize that, the better we can make this country. So it's been over 15 minutes. I like to keep these short because people tune out. No one wants to hear me talk for more than 15 minutes. Thank you guys for tuning in. This is Duane Whitmer on my weekly Whitmer Wednesdays on Twitter and Facebook every Wednesday at 7. Thank you guys for tuning in. I hope you guys have a great, great night. Enjoy this evening. Thanks, guys. Oops.